Oh man.
Oh man.
Oh man. This
Oh
is
man.
Road Gang Radio with me, Andre, Phone Master Dre, and the man, the myth, Jimmy Mack, live from the Deha House.
Hey ha, day ga. Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Road Gang Radio. Of course, the dulcimer sounds of Jimmy Mack on Road Gang Radio here. Guys, go to truckdown.com. Connect those dots on the map between yourself as a driver and the maintenance provider you need. Download the app. They've been doing it since 97, 50 states, 8 provinces. Truck up, and get down. Truckdown.com. Big shout out to our friends from Fastport, who have been solving America's toughest recruiting and workforce challenges through research, technology, and people. From registered apprenticeships to veteran readiness, you can learn more at fastport.com, nationalapprenticeship.org as well. Quick reminder, too, by the way, on today's Trucking with OOIDA, that's right, Trucking with OOIDA is immediately after Road Gang Radio. The association's executive vice president, Louis Pugh, joins hosts Ashley Blackford and Scott Thompson for a wide-ranging discussion about unannounced safety blitzes, strains on the supply chain, OOIDA's efforts to make the industry work for everyone, and much, much more. That is 11 in the center and noon in the Eastern Bloc, which, by the way, is where Collin Long does most of his business. You know that dude. We know that dude. Good morning to you, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
It is good to have you back on here as always. So, what is on the docket? Friday is always a slow day, of course, over in Washington D.C. Sorry, I'm being sarcastic. It's a gigantic news dump, is what happens on Fridays over in the nation's capital. But what you got cooking? What you got going on? What are you looking forward to seeing about tomorrow?
Folks are starting to talk about how we're going to pay for our infrastructure again, which has kind of been a dormant issue for a little while. I think folks have been, excuse me, you're always the first people I talk to in the morning, and my throat is never quite ready.
Oh, you should hear me in the Colin, let me tell you something. The first 10 minutes of this show is Stray and I hitting the mute buttons going, I mean, Nemo has a button on his microphone that is called the cough drop. I am not kidding you. It literally is a button that says the cough drop, and you push it and he goes, Nemo. That's what he does. So we understand.
Thank
man.
you.
Thank
you for your compassion.
We're right.
Like I was trying to say, people are starting to talk about how we're going to pay for our infrastructure. There's a highway bill coming. A lot of folks have been talking about what's going to be in that as far as policy is concerned for what happens on our roads. But now people are starting to think, actually we got to pay for this thing. And I think that will come much more to the forefront in conversations in the Capitol in the next couple of months as we work towards getting that bill potentially debuted this fall. So it's going to be fun. I mean, there's going to be folks that are certainly going to come after trucking. They do all the time. They always want to impose more fees.
Well, I mean,
on us.
Why should they? You guys don't pay anything. I mean, trucking doesn't pay anything. Yeah. I mean, given compared to what a four-wheel car, what a passenger car pays, that's nothing. 20 times more. 20 times more. You want to? I've talked a little bit about this. You want to unpack this for our friends out there to help them understand how the piggy bank analogy continues to this very moment.
Yeah, I don't think anyone appreciates the fact that truckers pay 20 times more than the average passenger vehicle driver. I mean, it's like $40,000 for a small trucking business like the ones we represent every year in federal taxes and fees. And I think passenger vehicle drivers certainly don't know that, but I think a lot of folks on Capitol Hill don't necessarily know or appreciate that either. And I think it's something we're going to have to certainly educate them on again now that we're talking about reauthorizing a highway bill. But they look to us and they say, well, let's just squeeze more money out of them. And I want to be clear, our members are willing to pay more, but they believe everyone who uses the system should be willing to pay more, because that's how we start to modernize our roads. There hasn't been an increase in fuel taxes in decades. So certainly the cost of building our infrastructure has increased dramatically over that time, and we haven't been able to keep pace. So I want to be clear that OOIDA supports increases to user fees to pay for our infrastructure. We just want everyone to be ponying up. And when Congress starts looking for ways to generate revenue to pay for our roads, we think they got to do it in an equitable way. And there's folks talking about fuel tax increases. The Truckload Carriers Association chatted with us earlier this week about some plans they have. I imagine we're going to support them because, like I said, we've been in support of fuel tax increases for a number of years. And I think there's promise in the fact that folks on Capitol Hill are now starting to talk about the need to bring EVs, electric vehicles, into the fold. I think their owners have been getting literally a free ride for too long. They don't really pay anything into the system because they're not buying fuel. So having them start to contribute, I think, will be important. And having hybrid vehicles starting to contribute more than they currently do will also be important. I mean, hybrid owners, I should say, also have had a pretty good deal because the efficiency of their vehicle allows them to pay very minimal fuel taxes while getting all the benefits of the road. So it's time everyone starts paying more, including truckers, but we want to make sure that folks who aren't currently paying in the system are there and are contributing.
Collin, I'm looking at Dre right now, and we both noticed this. There's a certain sense of people need to pay more, but there's also in your voice, maybe it's just Thursday morning. Maybe it's because usually when you talk to us, it used to be on Friday, and there's lots to look forward to for the weekend, so you can get past the cynicism and despair. But there just seems to be a note in your voice of, I'm going to say this, but there's no way these guys are going to raise taxes on their own constituents when it's easier to raise taxes on a bunch of guys who drive through their areas and they never have to see again and won't punish them. Do I detect any of that there? Or is there a sense of having to gear up for battle again? Is this more of a moment of pause? Yeah. That's what it is. Okay, good.
I think we will have to, as an industry, come together and fight proposals that unfairly target truckers as revenue generators. And we as an industry have a history of defeating those proposals. We've done it for the last two highway bills, and we'll be capable of doing it again. But I think until Congress musters the chutzpah to go after passenger vehicle drivers and make sure they're contributing at a sustainable rate, we just won't see any increases because, like I said, we've demonstrated that the trucking industry can resist punitive fees being increased on us. But as a result, Congress just throws up their hands and doesn't do anything. But those days are gone. I mean, they've been transferring money from the general fund, which is the big pot of taxes here in Washington, D.C., for a number of years. That's going to become more difficult because Republicans who control both chambers here in Washington want that transfer to be offset. And, they've cut a lot of money. They're in the process of cutting a lot of federal funding out there. I don't know how they're going to be able to cut more to generate enough of an offset to backfill the Highway Trust Fund. So it's a very complex issue. It's a very divisive issue. But thankfully, I think the trucking industry is pretty united in our opposition against fees levied solely on us, and also pretty united in our support for increasing user fees in an equitable and fair way.
There are two things at play here that actually in some ways create cognitive dissonance. The first of which is it's what I don't get from a lot of lawmakers, and I know there are people who are like, you never raise my taxes, never increase my fees. If you do that, you are an enemy of the state and have basically betrayed Adam Smith and Alexander Hamilton, even though I don't know anything about them. On the flip side of that, though, it is one of the easiest cases to make. I mean, everybody in their community has at least one bridge whose actual nickname is the Die Instantly Bridge. Everybody's got at least two or three roads in their community where it's like, if I hit that pothole, I'm going to be able to have a secret backdoor trade deal with China. I mean, that's just the reality of what we're talking about here. So it's an easier sell, and you use the word chutzpah. Use it properly, by the way. But what really is chutzpah to me is the idea that millions of Americans who, sit there and say, well, truckers should pay more as they drink their coffee. Where did it come from? As they stand there in their cheap clothes, how did they buy them? We can have that conversation. But the chutzpah is the American public, not the truckers, the American public somehow believing that it can use interstates, which, by the way, were created for the military and interstate commerce, that they can use interstates as if they are just simply a free lunch. And this is the issue here. And what I don't get is there's a lot of things that are hard to sell. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of things that are hard to get. They're fabulously wealthy people who don't know why they have to pay into the Social Security system. I can explain it to them, but they don't want to hear it. The one thing you can tell somebody is, what is this money going towards? The road that you almost drove off of the other night. You know, the one that wasn't fixed. And I'm wondering why even on this, people have a lack of political will to go to the people and say, if you don't pay these fees, you're not going to have any roads, or you're still going to see more expensive prices, because at some point you ask the truckers and the companies that employ them to pay more and more. They've got to pass the money off to you, right?
Yeah, I think, not to oversimplify things and not to be critical of the American public, but...
That's my job, not yours. You get to be very positive. You get to be very positive. I get to insult them. That's my job. Go ahead.
I just don't think they appreciate what they have. I mean, the interstate system is pretty darn good, but, you know, there's always going to be potholes. And I think people just, every winter, they're like, well, there's potholes. Our infrastructure is in disrepair. And what good is our money doing? And I think there's this disconnect between the fact that you need to pony up more to pay for the system. I mean, I think if more Americans sat in traffic or had damage done to their car related to the poor condition of the infrastructure, or, God forbid, had safety implications affecting them, maybe they would better appreciate the highways. But it shouldn't come to that. And I think that's where truckers really have a great argument to make and a great role in this discussion is they appreciate our infrastructure, and they're out there saying we're willing to pay more for it because we know it needs to be maintained at a higher level. I don't know that that's the case with the average passenger vehicle driver, unfortunately. And those are the folks who a lot of members of Congress, whether it be the House or the Senate, whether it be Democrats or Republicans, are concerned about bothering by increasing their taxes right now. And
hey, I hate to do. Yeah, what is it?
Hey,
I hate to do this, but would you mind me asking you to give us money for the roads you use all the time? I don't want to bother you, but I see that you're taking a whole bunch of produce off of the shelves. We just would like you to pay for that, please. I mean, that's what's happening here. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like I said, I just think my biggest problem isn't so much the people either, because I'm not going after the American public. I'm going after the people in Washington and the people at the state level. I really think you could make that case. Look, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it takes somebody with one of those, fake voices like Senator Kennedy to go like, I say, people got to pay their fair share. I mean, maybe so. Maybe we can all adopt like this low baritone voice and just tell people it's time to pay. Speaking of voices, Dave Nemo wrote me, Collin. He says, for early in the morning, what he does is that he actually drinks pineapple juice in the morning, and it really does get him right with the vocal chops.
Pineapple juice.
He said pineapple juice. Pineapple juice. He's really a big supporter of that, along with guzzling buckets of water. That's a big thing. And the reason he's really promoting it is because all pineapple juice cans have a tracker on them. No, that's not true. I do want to pivot to trackers, though. Let's talk about trackers a little bit here, okay? Trackers on truckers.
Sounds good.
Right.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound good. We oppose it, but I'm happy to talk about it because this is another thing that's coming through the lens of the highway bill here in the next couple of months. And if folks remember, this was something we defeated a few years ago. Again, as a unified industry, I don't think anyone on the motor carrier side was interested in these proposals to require everyone to use a universal electronic identifier, UEI, or whatever the term is they're going to be using. But it's widely unpopular amongst truckers. It's extremely unpopular among OOIDA members and board members. And if you remember, the Department of Transportation was sniffing around this issue, and they put out a request for information, and I think they ultimately got what they knew they were going to get, which was pretty broad opposition from the motor carrier industry.
You think?
And
you think? You think? I mean, it's like...
yeah.
I'm going to say something really quick here because I want to get a shot in here. In what universe do they think about people who can actually explain to you how the moon landing was fake and how there was a third shooter in the grassy knoll and know about the Fair Play for Cuba Committee? Do they think a bunch of guys like that are going to accept what they're talking about here? I mean, what is wrong with these people? Good. Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
I mean, and there was either some brilliance in what DOT did, or I don't know. But one of the things they included is, well, what do you think, truckers, if we included information on these identifiers related to you, the driver? And I mean, that was the end of the game from our perspective. And I think that kind of poisoned the well for this issue for the long run. We're never going to come around and support it. But the fact that folks went so far as to say, well, there is a slippery slope here. We might actually want to include information beyond just the VIN of the truck and have information related to the motor carrier and the specific driver operating the vehicle. I think that kind of ended it. So maybe there was someone over at DOT that didn't want to see this come to fruition.
By the way, I followed this. I think it's exactly what happened. I'm just going to tell people this. And by the way, you know me. You've known me for a while. You know I'm not a paranoid conspiracist. But I'm going to tell people this right now. When Social Security numbers were first handed out, everyone was told this will never be used for anything else but your Social Security number and can't be used for anything else. How's that working out data-wise?
Good point.
How's that working out? That's a slippery slope right there. Oh my God. That is just okay. Go on. I'm sorry. Continue.
We were promised the same thing with ELDs, and if not for OOIDA, I think you would have seen an expansion of ELD information and the use beyond just compliance with hours of service. I know the third parties who provide the apps do whatever the hell they want with the data, frankly, but we've been careful in preventing the federal government from going beyond the initial authorizing language of the ELD mandate. But I think that has given us pause when it comes to things like this, like universal electronic identifiers. We know that it may enter as something that simply informs law enforcement that there's a truck coming up on an inspection station and provides the VIN number. But that's only where we start, and our concern is, where does it end, and does it ever end?
Oh, I can tell you where it ends. You know what? Since you are the one with the DOT number, sir, we're going to actually ask you to wear it. That's where it ends.
Yeah.
I mean, we're laughing, but I mean, come on. Like I said, no one will ever use your Social Security number for anything else, and no one who isn't authorized will ever have access to your Social Security number or the data contained there within. How'd that work out?
I'm laughing because I remember one of my first jobs as a teenager was a busboy at a Red Robin, and to enter into the system to track my hours, I had to enter my Social Security number, and at the time I didn't realize it, but looking back, I'm like, wow, it really was just used everywhere all the time.
Just absurd. And people, and I'll tell you what, the paranoia crowd in the 30s when they first passed it were like, this, of course, they were convinced that it was, because, everybody always looks in the book of Revelations for how they can match things up with their own present day, because everybody really wants the world to end on their watch, how beautiful that would be. There were people, I kid you not, who thought that it was the mark of the beast.
Yeah, maybe they were on to something, but I think that's how truckers use these universal electronic identifiers. It's just a bridge entirely too far, and we're going to oppose it. I don't think there's any safety value to them, and if there is, we haven't quite heard a compelling argument yet. So maybe we'll learn more, but I don't think there's much more to learn about it. I think truckers are just going to remain adamantly opposed, which means OOIDA is going to be fighting it tooth and nail.
Well, it's always one of my favorite things, too, when it comes to Washington, D.C. The great shutdown is, okay, if you do the following things, we'll have a conversation about it. And you give them your wish list and say, will you give us that? No, then we won't have that conversation, because they'll never give you the stuff. It's like,
Correct.
Yeah, if you pass all the things that we actually have that are written and ready to go and good to go, we will do this. That parking bill, let's talk about that first. That bathroom bill, let's have a discussion about that. That overtime thing, let's take care of all of that, and then we'll have a discussion about tracking us. And then you can track me while I walk into the bathroom so I can let you know what I think of you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Welcome to Road Gang Radio. It ain't your mom's Dave Nemo show, I'll tell you that right now. It ain't Dave Nemo's Dave Nemo show. He actually thinks you should drink pineapple juice. Collin, what are we looking forward to in regards to the highway bill passage? I mean, what is the deadline on this? When is this going to happen?
The deadline is, this is a tricky answer. The deadline is not until September of next year. They've got time, but the highway bill is a massive piece of legislation, and it takes a lot of work to not only satisfy the needs of members of Congress, but industry as well. And we all play a role in shaping this. And members of Congress from both the Senate and the House have submitted their priorities to the committees who are writing the bill. So now they have to do the difficult work of trying to satisfy as many folks as possible, try to include as many provisions in the bill that will ensure its passage without jeopardizing it getting derailed. And that's really difficult work. And I mean, just think of the trucking industry. I mean, we're not on the same page with everyone in our industry. We know that there's folks who represent larger carriers, who represent brokers, who represent law enforcement, who are pushing for things we don't like just as much as we're pushing for things they don't like. And it's a difficult dance to try to satisfy as many people as possible. And that's just within the trucking industry. We are certainly not the only collection of organizations who are lobbying on behalf of their members for things in the highway bill. So it's going to be a long process, but they've targeted the release of a bill, at least in the House T&I committee, by this fall, by the end of the year, which would be great. Although without the funding mechanisms in place, it gets really difficult. And we're positive. We think this is going to be a great bill for truckers because we've been doing a lot of great work here in Washington.
And you got a lot of friends. And all jokes aside, I've been picking on a lot of people this morning. You know, and by the way, guys, when the Democrats are in power, I'm going to give them a whole bunch of grief as well. That being said, you do have on the Republican side of the equation a lot of friends who are really, really busting their butt, and some bipartisan support. But there's some folks who really, and some surprising people who have gone to the wall for a lot of the other stuff that's in the highway bill that you guys actually are looking forward to, right?
Yeah, and it's a one bill that covers all of trucking policy for basically the next few years. And it's I give credit to the staff who has to cobble it together because they're being pushed and pulled in so many different directions. But from our perspective, you know, there's a lot of things that unite our industry. Truck parking. Everybody in the motor carrier industry and beyond supports truck parking. That should be an easy one. Actually, I think that will be an easy one. The House T&I committee has already voted for it in the previous Congress. I don't think dynamics have changed where they're now not going to include truck parking.
Is there going to be a party? Is there going to be a party in Grain Valley when that thing finally passes? When they finally get the truck parking in there, I mean, can we? There's
going to be a party in Washington D.C. I'll tell you that.
I'm coming. I'm coming, brother.
Fly out to Green Valley. There certainly will be. I mean, OOIDA has been leading the charge on truck parking for as long as I've been here, so almost a decade, and sometimes that's just how long it takes to get things.
Well, no, and that's the stick-to-itness. That's the stick-to-itness of this, guys. I mean, I'm talking to our listeners now, Collin, but the idea is that I don't give Dave a lot of advice. He's got a few years on me. The one piece of advice when it came to legal matters, I said, you have to act quickly. And he goes, why? Because things move so slowly. So it means you have to constantly be out there reminding people, jumping in their face, saying, don't forget about parking, because, you know, the world lurches from crisis to crisis. Parking is a slow-rolling crisis, and that's the truth of the matter. And you've got to kind of keep in these people's faces, and it becomes a drumbeat rather than just an orchestral explosion. You've just got to keep that thump going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we encourage our members, you know, let's say you live in Arizona, call your senator and tell them to get on board the truck parking bill. And we'll occasionally get feedback from members saying, you know, why bother? We've been trying to do this for so long. It's not going to happen. And that's frustrating. But I do appreciate the fact that a lot of owner-operators, you know, if there's something wrong with their business, they remedy it lickety-split. And there's not much of a long burn trying to get something done in that industry. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive. But here in Washington, it's a different mechanism. It's a different beast, and we have to be patient. We have to take time, which is obviously difficult when we're trying to get our members to advocate on behalf of themselves over a 10-year period for truck parking. But they still do a really good job. We just want more of them to do it. I mean, we have 150,000 members. If all 150,000 members were weighing in with their elected officials about the issues we're pushing here in Washington, they'd be done lickety-split too. I think that's important to remember, is that there's strength in numbers. And we do have great advocates, don't get me wrong. That's one of our strongest powers here in Washington is our grassroots advocacy. But we can do more, and we can do things more quickly and more effectively if really everyone starts getting involved. And it's a highway bill year, and it's even more imperative now that we get folks across the country weighing in with their lawmakers about the things we're pushing.
The way I kind of explain to people who don't understand how government works, and this is a really, I'm not being a jerk or facetious, it's lawn care. It's lawn care. I mean, it really is the idea that it's like, no, you never have to stop weeding. No, it never goes away. No, you never have to stop cutting back that bush that keeps growing over the tool shed. No, you never have to stop, making sure you lay down the right things to stop the bugs you don't want and encourage the bugs you do want. And it goes on and on and on. And if you focus too much on one thing, then you find there are other areas of the garden, other areas of the lawn that go all to pot. And if you can conceive of it like that, it makes that grind a whole lot easier to kind of fathom, because you're not just making things happen like building that new shed, you're also stopping the weeds and the invasive species from coming in. There's a lot of invasive species in Washington, D.C., and Collin Long is stopping them from coming. Thank you, sir. Always good to have you on.
Absolutely. I love being on. I'll talk to you next week, probably.
You got it, my friend. Washington Trucking Week, as always, is a recurring segment here on Road Gang Radio.